Outside Birmingham, Alabama, the body of Brenda Bowen is found floating in a river.
It was wrapped in a sheet, it was wrapped in some chains, it was tied with some rope.
Her ex-husband, Jerry Lee Bowen, jumps bail and leads investigators on a cross-country manhunt.
Police! Police, your head! Get down with your head!
We were always afraid that if he did it once, he could do it again.
Bowen is desperate and takes drastic measures to erase his identity.
It was exactly like holding your finger to a fire. It was very, very painful.
Criminals sometimes try to escape from justice. This is the story of how one man almost got away with it. January 28, 1997. On a cold winter day in Shelby County, Alabama, Brenda Breckenridge Bowen, a mother of two and a local church leader, disappears.
I'm the one that received a phone call from Mr. Breckenridge, Brenda's dad, saying that something was wrong. That Brenda had not come to the house to pick her mother up to take her to a doctor's visit that morning.
Sheriff Chris Curry is a 27-year veteran of the Shelby County Sheriff's Office and knows the family well.
Look, it wasn't that there was a flat tire or something of that nature, that enough time had gone by and he realized that no phone call, no contact from Brenda, that there was something definitely wrong.
Brenda is well known in town, and word of her disappearance quickly spreads throughout the community. Her close friend, Darlene Story, knows Brenda from church.
I first learned of Brenda's disappearance probably around lunchtime, the day she disappeared. I knew something was wrong and just got in the car and left and headed to the church. That's where the people that we're looking for were.
We've got about 20 zones that we're going to be covering today.
Many in the community turn out to help search for Brenda.
We're looking for anything that Brenda may have dropped, anything that you recognize.
A local church serves as the command post.
Let's go.
The volunteers fan out from there.
To be able to search, you felt like you were doing something constructed.
We had just a tremendous effort put forth by the volunteers and the law enforcement, the rescue squads, to try and locate her.
Despite the hundreds of volunteers searching for Brenda, there is one individual suspiciously absent from the efforts: Brenda's ex-husband, Jerry Lee Bowen. By the time of Brenda's disappearance, Jerry and Brenda had been divorced for 2 years. Brenda and their children are living in the main house, while Jerry, a successful contractor, lives in the converted garage next door.
You always maintain hope. I mean, the lady and I were divorced, and even though I didn't want to live with her anymore, she was the mother of my 2 children, and I didn't wish her any harm in any way.
Investigators think otherwise. They search Bowen's house, looking for anything that might link him to Brenda's disappearance. Deputies come up empty-handed. As the search continues into the night, they make a grim discovery. A volunteer spots Brenda's car. It's been abandoned on a dirt road deep in the woods, not far from her house.
It's very critical at the early stages of a search to do all you can do, because as time goes on, the chances of finding the person, or worse, finding the person still alive, dwindle.
Deputies focus their attention on Jerry Lee Bowen.
And that night, about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, they asked me if I would go downtown to talk with them.
Bowen, did you come down to the office and ask some questions?
Bowen was a smart, manipulative person who liked to be in control, was very organized, and I think that when you dealt with him, you had to be on your guard.
What do you think happened? I think someone is either detaining her or has done away with her.
Did you have any participation in the disappearance of Brenda?
No.
Okay. Did you kill Brenda?
I was so embarrassed. I'd never been arrested, never spent a moment in jail, nothing. It turned my world upside down.
I want to admit something I didn't do.
Bowen gives deputies little information. They don't have enough evidence to hold him, so Bowen is released.
All right, we'll terminate the interview.
As weeks go by, both the investigators and the community begin to suspect the worst.
When somebody you love is missing, there's always that hope every night that wherever she was, that God would keep her safe and that the next day you would find her and she was going to be okay. But as time went on, you come to realize that's not going to happen.
On March 29th, 2 months after Brenda's disappearance, a body is found floating in the Coosa River, 16 miles from the Bowen house.
This phone call comes in that two fishermen discovered something in the river. The body had been in the water an extensive amount of time. It was wrapped in a sheet. It was wrapped in some chains. It was tied with some rope.
The forensics team arrives and examines the body. They are unable to locate many clues.
The coroner's office and the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences medical examiner could not pinpoint a specific cause of death because the body had been in the water apparently the entire 2 months and had deteriorated significantly.
News of the grisly discovery reaches a heartbroken community.
After 2 months, you know it's not going to be a good ending. It's a hard thing to realize that that's truly what happened to her.
With foul play clearly evident, the sheriff's office begins their homicide investigation. Police contact Brenda's neighbors, church members, business associates, and her ex-husband, Jerry Lee Bowen.
We keep working through that list, eliminating them for one reason or another, and keep coming back to Jerry with additional questions and issues, which he wasn't very forthcoming.
Bowen is their prime suspect. And for nearly a year, deputies continue to watch him, gather evidence, and build their case. Investigators reconstruct the events leading up to Brenda's disappearance. They return to the location where Brenda's body was found.
So it was an 11-month intensive effort put on by our investigators and associates before we reached the point where we were ready to present it to a grand jury.
Law enforcement heads out to arrest Jerry Lee Bowen.
Jerry was an accomplished firearms expert. He shot a lot, owned a lot of guns.
Investigators know that his gun collection includes a .44 caliber Magnum and a 12-gauge shotgun.
He had the potential to be dangerous if he chose to make a stand, so we took sufficient force to make sure it was handled effectively.
Let's go. Late on Friday afternoon, the sheriff, his deputies, and the SWAT team arrive at Bowen's home. They surround the building and cut the phone lines.
Mr. Bowen, come out with your hands up now. Your house is surrounded.
I got a phone call from someone that told me that they had gotten the indictment and were going to come to arrest me on a Friday afternoon, that Friday afternoon.
The sheriff offers one final warning.
Mr. Bowen, if you do not come out now, we are coming in.
There is no response from inside. Then they charge in.
Police your head! No, get down with your head! Left clear. Right clear.
They search the premises. Bowen is nowhere to be found.
I was told by a deputy sheriff that the sheriff had sent the SWAT team out there with a body bag saying, "We don't have enough evidence to convict him. Bring him back in a bag." That's the reason I ran.
Bowen knows that the authorities are highly motivated and fears that the arrest could turn violent. He leaves the county and spends the next 2 days laying low in a cheap motel. Bowen wants to turn himself in on his own terms. First thing Monday morning, Bowen calls his attorney to make the arrangements. Jerry Lee Bowen is indicted for murder. He makes bail the next day. The community is terrified that an accused killer is walking the streets.
After Jerry was arrested and then he was out on bail, it was a very scary time.
Bowen returns to work as a contractor. For him, life continues on as before. He shops at the hardware store where Darlene works.
But I remember once when he walked up, he offered me his hand to shake hands with me, and I just looked at his hand, and all I could think of was, this is the hand that killed her. There's no way I could touch him.
The trial begins on April 17th, 2000.
Mr. Bowen is a...
The DA presents his case.
This is not the upstanding citizen he would like you to think that he is.
There is no direct evidence linking Bowen to the murder of his ex-wife. But the DA presents a barrage of circumstantial evidence.
He had the motive, he had the ability, and he had the opportunity.
First, he challenges Bowen's claim to have been home during the time of Brenda's disappearance. According to a workman who stopped by the house, no one was home. Secondly, the DA shows that the knots used to tie Brenda up were unusual and were knots that Bowen knew how to tie. And finally, On the night of Brenda's disappearance, Bowen was already referring to her in the past tense, long before her body was found.
It had been less than a day.
Some of the things that we saw and heard afterwards, you'll never forget. There were pictures from the scene. There were details about how she looked when they found her. And Jerry just sat there so calm.
After deliberating for 3 days, the jury returns with their verdict.
Jerry Bowen, the jury has found you guilty of murder in the first degree.
Despite the lack of evidence, the district attorney has convinced the jury that they find Jerry Lee Bowen guilty of first-degree murder.
And I was just shocked, totally shocked, that they could convict me with no evidence and no witnesses and basically trumped up facts.
When the verdict did come, there was such a relief, and there was crying, but it was quiet. It was very quiet in the courtroom.
Sentencing will take place in 2 months.
Remarkably, despite being convicted of murder, Bowen is released on bail.
They let me out on bail because I had such a clean record, so it was not that hard to get bond.
The sheriffs oppose his release, but are unable to prevent it. His bail is set at $150,000. Bowen puts his property up to cover the bail and returns home. He is due for sentencing in 2 months.
So that bothered me, but his behavior didn't divulge anything. He was in town, he was at normal places, he was doing somewhat normal things. We did keep an eye on him. We did make sure we were watching, so to speak, but everything seemed to be normal.
June 20th, 2000. It's been 2.5 years since Brenda disappeared. Jerry Bowen has been convicted of her murder and is now due in court for sentencing.
You could feel the tension. You could feel that people were anxious about what the sentence was going to be. So as time goes by and we all look at our watch and we look at the clock on the wall and it's 15 minutes, it's 20 minutes past time that the court was supposed to convene, you can sense and feel that emotion developing in that room.
Finally, one of Bowen's lawyers enters the courtroom. He's worried.
Where is Mr. Bowen?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Bowen's lawyer tells the judge that their client is not available for sentencing. In fact, he's gone, and they have no idea where he is.
First thing that went through my head was we need to get a search warrant. And from that point forward, a nationwide search was instituted.
The sheriff acts quickly. His deputies search Bowen's home and discover a note he has left behind.
I left a note for my family saying that I didn't feel like I should have to spend time in prison for a crime that I did not commit and that I was going on the run, to let them know that I was leaving.
Bowen began planning his escape 2 months earlier, the day after being convicted of murder. He researched how to be a fugitive, how to disappear, and how to assume a new identity. He knew that deputies were watching him, and that he would be spotted if he tried to leave town in his own truck. He needed a car that authorities wouldn't recognize.
I put on a fedora hat, wore my glasses, dressed in subdued clothing, and carried a cane.
There you go.
Bowen paid cash for the car, and then prepared for his new life on the run.
So I took everything I could in these 3 bags, put it in the car, and the next night, as soon as it got dark, I left. I was kind of like hoping for the best, expecting the worst.
Under the cover of darkness, Bowen leaves his home, his family, and the successful business he's built. He's now a fugitive on the run.
A pair of headlights would pop up in the rearview mirror, and I wonder if they're following me, you know, and I just left, paranoid, extremely sad, and just a little scared.
Investigators quickly realize that the manhunt for Bowen will require a national or even an international search. They contact the FBI and request assistance. The FBI assigns a special agent to the case. He is undercover and cannot be identified.
One of the first things you wind up doing in any investigation is you go back and contact friends, family, and associates.
The FBI search Bowen's house and seize his computer.
At the time, we had no real indication as to which direction he was traveling. All of his internet search terms pretty much went to all corners of the U.S. I mean, to me, it became pretty apparent that his intent was to leave, to change his identity, and not to come back.
Bowen's computer also reveals some disturbing information.
There was some pornographic images on that computer that I would not ever dream of being allowed to be seen by the general public. They were extremely graphic, extremely brutal. That kind of revelation that here's the inner world that Bowen lived in, it was very, very frightening. It was indicative that this is a dangerous person that lives within that seemingly normal shell.
The FBI alerts border officials that Bowen may attempt to leave the country. They also continue their search of Alabama, scouring the entire state. What the police don't know is that Bowen is 1,500 miles away. He's roaming the streets of Reno, Nevada.
I arrived in Reno, and Reno was open enough and laid back enough that I felt more comfortable there, that I could blend in and more easily disappear there.
Bowen needs a fake ID. He plans to find a homeless man, befriend him, and then assume his identity.
I started shopping for someone who looked like me. I started hitting the soup halls, the public parks, and befriending homeless men who were close to my age, close to my height, too.
How you doing?
Bowen finds it easy to manipulate the homeless men he meets.
Yes, take care. You have a great day, okay?
The homeless people are eager to talk about what used to be, how strong and good-looking they used to be, how they used to work, because present day is too painful.
I'm doing all right. Anybody thirsty?
It doesn't take Bowen long to lock onto a good prospect.
I befriended Richard Bassett, who was an older gentleman who slept on the banks of the Truckee River in Reno. I found out that he had almost no contact with family.
Who wants to work now?
I found out he would not work. He fit the criteria.
No, you go ahead, Richard. I got your back. You go ahead and take a sleep.
Bowen gets a hold of Richard Bassett's driver's license and Social Security card. Bowen hits the road with the makings of a new identity in hand. He travels from Reno, Nevada to Salt Lake City, Utah, a journey of 500 miles.
When I got the information from Richard Bassett, I decided to go to the DMV in Salt Lake City and get my driver's license and state ID. That was a very high point of anxiety for me.
Cameras line the ceiling. Police man the doors. If he gets through this, he's home free. If he gets caught trying to steal an identity, it's straight to prison.
You gonna get a new driver's license?
I made sure I was dressed very neat, conservative.
Yes, ma'am.
Even with all that and the documents I had in my hand, a certified Social Security card, and the information from Richard Bassett's old driver's license, it was still a very anxious few minutes.
Bowen fills out the paperwork using Bassett's information. He's careful, but the tension is too much. He slips up and uses his own year of birth instead of Richard Bassett's.
When they noticed the mistake, I not only had been sitting there doing nothing but worrying, waiting for the photo to print out and letting my anxiety build, they called me on the mistake, and at that point I thought I was dead.
There's a problem here.
The teller at the DMV points out the discrepancy in birth dates. On the outside, Bowen remains calm and at ease, but on the inside, he's terrified.
That's my son's birthday.
I think because of the way I looked, the way I was talking, acting so comfortable and nonchalant, that it was passed off as an honest mistake.
Okay, well, seems to be fine.
The teller lets the mistake go and gives Bowen his new ID.
Thank you.
And I got outside, it was like a flood of relief, just almost tangible, washing over me.
Jerry Bowen is now known as Richard Bassett. Using his new identity, Bowen begins to establish a life for himself in Salt Lake City. He falls back on his drywall experience and lands a small subcontracting job.
Well, I started finishing the drywall almost immediately, within just a few days. And then my paranoia started kicking in.
Bowen decides it's time to literally erase the last link to his past identity.
I decided to etch or erase my fingerprints from my fingertips.
From his research, Bowen learned how to use acid to burn the prints off his fingers. Bowen begins the slow, painful process of holding each finger in acid for as long as he can take the pain.
Burning like fire. A lot of times I would lift my finger out of the acid and it would be hurting so bad I would pace up and down the room.
Bowen needs to keep working. He can't afford to damage all of his fingers at once. So over a period of several months, he works one finger at a time. Then he gets to his ring finger and goes too far.
As the acid was working on the finger, apparently it penetrated below the skin and killed the end of the finger because it immediately turned black like severe frostbite, and over the next few days it shriveled and became as hard as a piece of wood. I knew then that the end of the finger was dead.
Okay, why don't you have a seat? We'll take a look. Thanks, Doc. So tell me what you did.
Bowen must get medical attention. He knows it's a risky move, but he has no choice. If the doctor sees scarring on his other fingertips, he might become suspicious.
I do construction and it gets kind of rough sometimes. Do this for me.
So I made up a story about being hurt on the job and went to a doctor. I was very careful when he was working on my finger not to let him see the pads of the other fingers.
Lucky for Bowen, the doctor doesn't notice. He simply removes the dead part of Bowen's finger.
He saved the last joint, but I still lost about a half an inch of the finger.
Bowen lives in Salt Lake City for the next 2 years. He's feeling confident in his new identity as Richard Bassett. Back in Alabama, investigators are still following up on leads.
When you have a fugitive missing, of course, you start right around where you are, and the local media was very helpful. We put posters of flyers out that they showed on TV, told the story, pictures. We put flyers all around the community.
Meanwhile, Jerry Bowen is on his way back to Reno, Nevada. He has a nagging feeling about the real Richard Bassett and returns to check on him.
I was concerned about Richard Bassett and his being healthy and alive because he was a hardcore alcoholic who apparently had a lot of internal damage that the alcohol had done to him over the years.
Shortly after arriving in Reno, he runs into a few familiar faces. It turns out that the real Richard Bassett has died. Bowen can no longer use his identity.
Now the process of finding an ID has to start again, since Richard Bassett is now dead. So I go back from Reno to Salt Lake City, quit work, and started the whole process all over again.
In Salt Lake City, Utah, Bowen begins to frequent the Salvation Army Soup Hall. Once again, he's in need of a new identity.
You got any spare change on you, man?
Bowen is looking for an ideal candidate when he meets a homeless man named Stephen Bell Starbuck.
I think he hit me up for $1, or bum change, and I gave him $1. And he got emotional. He said, I've been here X amount of weeks. And he said, you're the first person to ever help me.
You got family to back you up?
And from that point, I started talking to him. I befriended him with the idea to find out everything I could about him. Found out he was less than a year older than I. Even though he was several inches shorter, his ID, I found out, showed him as being 6'1".
Bowen learns that Starbuck has no children, has never been married, and can't keep a job. He's a perfect candidate. One night, Starbuck comes back late. He's drinking heavily.
How you doing, Steve?
Bowen waits for an opening,
Haven't seen you for a while.
then makes his move.
I stole his Social Security card. And I stole it when he was drunk and unconscious.
Bowen leaves Salt Lake City and heads back to the south. His destination is Charleston, South Carolina. On the way, he stops by a small-town DMV and easily obtains a new driver's license under the name Stephen Bell Starbuck.
I'm a little bit apprehensive about being back in the South, this close to Alabama, but I reason that I'm far enough away that I shouldn't have hardly any contact with anybody that really knows me. It was one full state away from Alabama, and I felt like that was enough.
In the summer of 2004, Bowen begins to set up a new life in Charleston, South Carolina. He meets a woman, and they begin dating. Once again, Bowen finds work installing drywall and renovating homes. Late one afternoon, on his way home from work, Bowen has an encounter he's been trying to avoid for 4 years.
I was coming home from work one day, and a policeman pulled in behind me. He turns on his light, and I knew that I was about to get a speeding ticket.
Bowen knows that no traffic stop is minor when you're a fugitive.
License and registration, sir.
Sure.
You know how fast you were going?
No, sir.
You were doing 47 and a 35.
Sorry, I didn't know. I was a little tired coming after work.
Okay. Well, you can wait here for a moment, Mr. Starbuck. I'll be right back.
Sure.
The officer runs Bowen's license. This is the moment he spent 4 years preparing for.
My driver's license and photo was valid. My fingertips were already etched at that point.
Well, Mr. Starbuck, everything seems to be in order here.
Bowen's license comes back clean. The officer lets Bowen go.
Next time you mind slowing it down just a little bit, save ourselves the trouble.
Yeah, I will. Thank you very much, officer.
You're very welcome, sir. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
It looks like Bowen is getting away with life as a fugitive. But he's never felt so alone.
I guess because I was no longer as anxious, I was getting more and more homesick. Missing my children, missing my family, my sisters.
Bowen gives in to the longing. He risks everything and drives back to Shelby County.
Just drove through the old neighborhood and didn't stop, didn't say hi to anyone. I had it in the back of my mind that I might turn myself in, that being on the run, out of contact with my family, my children, I just was not happy.
Bowen hasn't forgotten about Shelby County, and the community hasn't forgotten about him either.
The impact of his crime was felt very widespread. There's not the words to say just how strongly everybody felt about the fact that he had to be found, that he had to pay for what he had done. It went on so long that we did begin to think that was never going to happen.
After nearly 4 years of searching for Bowen, the sheriff's office has run out of leads. All they can do now is wait and hope that Bowen gets careless.
We were in neutral. You know, all of our efforts had been unproductive. We had support from federal agencies that had not turned any rocks over. We'd heard nothing in quite some time. So it was a very low ebb.
The FBI is making little progress as well.
Sometimes, you know, especially as the investigation drags on, you know, the longer it goes, you feel like the less likely you are to actually catch the person.
As the years go by and Bowen remains on the loose, the public lives in fear.
I think everybody's antennas were up. We were always afraid that if he did it once, he could do it again, because there wasn't a reason that he had to have done what he did.
So I felt like every law enforcement officer in the country was in danger. I felt like the family members and people that had testified were potentially in danger.
They have one more arrow in their quiver and contact a popular crime show. They hope the media can help catch Bowen.
It's better than sitting there not doing anything. Sometimes none of the leads pan out. Sometimes you get lucky and pretty quickly they will.
In Charleston, South Carolina, a woman sees the broadcast and thinks she recognizes Bowen.
It's Steve. It's Steve. Steve.
A man she knows as Stephen Starbuck has been dating her sister on and off for the past year.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
At this point, she knows that Starbuck is really Jerry Lee Bowen. Her husband calls the FBI's Violent Crime Squad and reports Bowen.
The agent here in Birmingham received a call in December 2004 in which the caller identified himself as an individual that thought that he had information, knew not only who Jerry Bowen was posing as, but also his whereabouts.
The agent passes the information along to the Charleston Police Department.
Yeah, Jenkins. Yeah.
It's the end of the shift for two detectives, but they drive to Bowen's house and follow up on the tip.
It was a work night, I think Tuesday, right before Christmas, and I went to bed at my normal time, around 9 or so, went to sleep. About 11 o'clock or so at night, I heard a knock on my door.
Bowen is surprised to see two detectives standing at his front door.
He said, Mr. Starbuck, we need to talk to you a minute. He said, we need you to prove that you are who you say you are. I knew at that second that the game was probably up.
Police tell Bowen to get dressed and come with them.
Can you just give me a minute? Make it quick.
Bowen agrees and heads back to his room.
So I walked back into my bedroom, and let me say there was 2 guns in my bedroom, loaded.
Bowen has a decision to make: grab the guns or take his chances down at the police station. He decides to leave the guns and go peacefully.
I was going to hold out because of my fingertips being etched. I was still holding to that hope.
Bowen has spent 4.5 years erasing his old identity and building a new one. Now he's about to face the moment of truth.
Chin down. Let's go. I think that's you.
That's not me. I've never been arrested.
He immediately started saying, "You really look like the guy I've got here." He made a comment at one point. He said, "I would bet the farm you're Jerry Bowen."
Stephen Starbuck. I don't know who this Jerry Bowen is. That's not me.
I'm going to process you and find out. All right?
Police run his fingerprints to confirm his identity. The scarring on his fingertips obscures most of his prints, but there's enough information left for police to make a positive ID.
When the guy started rolling my fingers, I knew the jig was up. And then I admitted to being Jerry Bowen.
Okay. I'm the guy you're looking for. I'm Jerry Bowen. I'm Jerry Bowen.
What did I tell you? Good. Made it easier on yourself.
The Charleston Police Department calls the Shelby County Sheriff.
It's around midnight, and North Charleston Police Department is called, and they believe that they have Jerry Bowen.
Are you sure it's him? He's sitting right next to me.
Sheriff Curry is hopeful, but he's not convinced.
I asked him his children's names, and he named both his children. And I said, spell his daughter's name. And she spells her name with a J instead of a G, as most people would. And when I heard him say J as the first letter, I told him, I said, don't let him go. That's the guy.
Bowen is finally captured. He has been on the run for 4.5 years since being convicted of murdering his ex-wife.
When I finally admitted to being Jerry Bowen, there was a sense of relief and almost no sense of anxiety. It was like, I know hard times are coming, but I've been through hard times.
Today, Bowen's new identity is inmate number 238713. He's a convict at the Limestone Correctional Facility outside of Huntsville, Alabama. He is sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind these bars.
I can't say that I regret going on the run, because I got an extra 4.5 years of freedom, if you want to call being away from family and friends freedom. I am alive today, even though I'm incarcerated, and if I hadn't went on the run, I honestly don't know if I would be alive or not.
It was Bowen's careful planning that kept him out of the hands of law enforcement for such a long time.
In the end, all the steps he had taken, all the precautions he had taken, wasn't enough to keep him from being captured and going to prison where he belonged.
Jerry Lee Bowen still maintains his innocence. He believes his life was in danger back in Shelby County.
I knew I was innocent, and I knew they had no evidence, no witnesses, no facts showing that I did, but the circumstantial evidence actually cleared me.
Authorities are confident that justice has been served.
The Jerry Bowen fugitive case was the most satisfying fugitive case I'd worked on, to see that the system actually works.
I think when you look at murderers in general, they come in a lot of different sizes, shapes, makeups, and I think Jerry is a case where you can't tell a book by its cover, and I think within Jerry there were serious issues.
are you doing?
In 1975, Michael Brown is a convicted murderer.
I believe he's a sociopath. I believe he has no conscience.
15 years later, he escapes from an Oklahoma prison.
I just wanted to know what it was like to be free for a while.
He and his wife assume new identities and lead a double life.
He's the kind of guy that you'd invite over for dinner.
Investigators will not rest until this fugitive is back behind bars. Criminals sometimes try to escape from justice. This is the story of how one man almost got away with it. 11 p.m., May 14th, 1975. 3 teenagers arrive at a Tulsa, Oklahoma insurance company. It's their latest target in a string of neighborhood burglaries. 18-year-old Michael Brown is the ringleader. Brown heads to the back of the building with his accomplice, 15-year-old Dennis Woodward. 17-year-old Dolores Strange waits outside with a getaway car.
Dennis and I went to the back of the building and broke out a window, crawled in through that. And we were inside, just going through desks, looking for money.
As the 2 teenagers ransack the office, businessman Richard Sullivan pulls into the parking lot with his wife and daughter. He's just returned from a business trip. At the last minute, he decides to stop by the office to pick up a file. Sullivan walks into his office.
What are you doing?
Just out of the blue, this guy just walks in on us. We never heard him enter, never heard him come in. It just all of a sudden, we were all 3 upon each other, face to face.
Give me your wallet.
Woodward pulls out a .22 caliber pistol.
Give me your wallet. Get it out. It's okay. Just give him your wallet. And,
When he starts to panic, Brown quickly takes charge.
I said turn around. Then walk over to the wall. What did you do?
Fear is the only thing that I can even possibly think of as my motive for picking the gun up and just pointing at the man and pulling the trigger, you know?
Meanwhile, Sullivan's wife and daughter are waiting in the car when they hear a loud blast.
I just heard a noise.
They find a security guard and ask him to check on her husband.
Let's go. Come on.
The 2 boys rush from the scene.
I ran, you know. I don't remember running back into the building. I don't remember going out through the window we came in, but that was what happened. And I ran and went home to my mom's house.
They walked away with $30. They killed a man for $30 bucks.
The security guard notices the open window. He sees a crumpled body lying on the floor.
Sir, all right? Hey.
After further investigation, he delivers the news to Mrs. Sullivan and her daughter.
The victim was shot dead between the shoulders, in the back, no exit wound. 22 caliber pistol, automatic, so it was quite apparent that he was simply executed.
Detective Charles Sasser of the Tulsa Police Department has investigated dozens of homicide cases. He arrives on the scene the next morning.
When you're working a homicide case, you have to look at all angles. Now, looking at the scene, I say burglary.
Sasser examines the evidence closely. The crime scene hints that the job was carried out by amateurs.
If you're a professional burglar, you're going to break in somebody who has furs. You're going to break in somebody who's got jewels. You're going to break someplace that you can make some money. Insurance companies don't keep money.
With no eyewitnesses, Sasser has a grueling investigation ahead of him. Meanwhile, Michael Brown goes on with life as if nothing has happened.
After that happened, I didn't see Dennis or Dolores. I avoided them mostly because I didn't want to talk about it with nobody. I didn't want to remember it. I didn't want it brought up. And maybe they were trying to stay away from me as much as I was trying to stay away from them, you know. I am sorry to say this, but it is the truth. I totally forgot about it. It was completely out of my mind by then.
Detective Sasser begins looking for possible suspects in the area.
What you do is work snitches, informants. And most of your informants are petty thieves. And you keep a whole little staff of them around. Names start popping up because they don't want to be associated with the murder.
At the local rec center, they question anyone who might have inside information on the recent neighborhood burglaries. 12 days after the murder, Sasser gets a promising tip from a couple of informants.
Mike Brown said he did something.
They said a guy named Mike and a guy named Dennis were pulling a bunch of these burglaries. So I run them through the police files, and they're petty burglars. They've been busted.
It turns out that Brown and Woodward aren't new at this. Sasser knows one of the suspects, Dennis Woodward.
These guys are your age.
Denny Ray Woodward, I had known him since he was 6 months old.
The next day, Sasser waits for Woodward to show up at the rec center. He's got one problem. Sasser needs information, but Woodward can't be questioned without a lawyer present. But Sasser's got a trick up his sleeve.
We're going to wait till Denny comes out of the rec center, wait till he's crossing the street, and we're going to come down on him like gangbusters. We're going to scare the holy living hell out of him.
I didn't do anything. You're under arrest.
After throwing cuffs on Woodward, Sasser starts to toy with him.
And I said, I don't want to question you, Denny. I have nothing to say to you. I have all the evidence I know. You're guilty of murder. You're going to the seat, kid.
Right now, we have no.
Sasser gets Woodward to do exactly what he wants.
He's jumping up and down. He's hyper. He's jumping up and down. Mr. Sasser, Mr. Sasser. Denny, shut up. I can't talk to you. And Denny Ray said, Mr. Sasser, I didn't do it. Mike Brown did it. He did it. I was there. I saw him.
I didn't know he was gonna kill anybody. He pulled out a gun and he shot the guy. I didn't know. Okay.
There's no way that he can back out now. I mean, that's a spontaneous confession. And I had told him a number of times not to talk to him. And so that led to a statement.
Sasser gets another break. The stress gets to Dolores Strange. She comes into the police station and confesses.
It looked like she'd lost 10, 15 pounds that month. I mean, she was in bad shape. And her conscience was really bothering her.
With Woodward and Strange in custody, Detective Sasser's next step is to hunt down Michael Brown, the alleged mastermind of the crime. Sasser knows he's dealing with a cold-blooded murderer.
Interesting thing what Dolores told us that night. After the shooting, Michael Brown says, Dolores, I just shot a man. I just shot him. He says, if I'd had another bullet, I'd shot his eyes out.
On May 31st, 2 weeks after the murder, Sasser finally tracks down Michael Brown at his mother's house.
We'll go real early in the morning, try to surprise this kid so we don't have to kill him. Mother comes to the door. I just push her out of the way.
You are not allowed my house. Get the hell out. You are nothing inside.
I go right on through, and she's grabbing at me and hitting at me, this kinds of thing, and she's calling me everything in the world.
You get out of my house. Get out of my house.
Get off! Get off, baby! Get back!
Oh, let me.
As Sasser and his partner rush inside, Brown quietly waits in his room. Detective Sasser and his partner head straight for Brown's bedroom.
I kicked the bedroom door in, just ran the shotgun up and, right in his face, and I said, don't move, you're a dead man.
Don't move, you're dead.
As Sasser points his shotgun, he looks Brown square in the eyes.
The interesting thing about Mike is, he had these like gray-blue eyes. No change of expression whatsoever. I mean, he's like he's almost empty.
Get up! Hands behind your back!
It was like I just froze, and all I could think of was, I hope they don't arrest me. I hope they don't find out that I did it.
You can't do this to us. Don't take my baby away.
Inside the interrogation room, Sasser knows that Brown won't break down easily.
He's not going to tell me a word. I would call him a sociopath. No conscience. I was top 14 years. I've arrested hundreds of killers. But this 18-year-old boy was the coldest, emptiest kid I'd ever talked to.
You want to talk? I understand. Well, I have someone here who might want to say something to you.
Once again, Sasser uses Dennis Woodward to his advantage. He decides to pit the two friends against one another.
I bring Denny Ray to the door. I want them to confront each other. And Denny Ray says, "You killed him, Mike."
Man, I already told him everything, okay? Just tell him, all right? Just tell him that you killed him. Yes.
You grow up around people, and you've always telling each other, you know, if we get caught, we don't say a word. I mean, that was just the code, you know, you didn't say nothing. And all I could think of was just despised him, you know. I felt like he was weak.
Mr. Brown? Michael Brown goes on trial for murder in October 1975. A jury finds him guilty of first-degree murder. His sentence, the death penalty.
I sentence you to death by electrocution.
Throughout the trial, just no emotion whatsoever. Once in a while, he would glare at Denny or glare at Dolores because they were copping on him. But other than that, there was nothing.
Brown barely survives his first year on death row.
I spent the first year just feeling totally sorry for me. Life in that cell was just, I mean, it was beyond monotonous. I mean, it was just the most boring situation you could ever find yourself in, with absolutely nothing to do.
Then, a glimmer of hope. On July 6, 1976, the U.S. Supreme Court declares that the death penalty in Oklahoma is unconstitutional. 36 prisoners have their sentences commuted to life. Michael Brown is one of them. He must serve 15 years before he's eligible for parole. Although the future looks dim, Brown tries to make prison life more bearable. He spends the next 8 years laying low and staying out of trouble.
And all I wanted to do was get a job so I could be out moving around every day instead of being locked down.
Letter. January 1984. Brown receives an unexpected letter. It's from a woman named Donna Moses, a local churchgoer who corresponds with inmates.
The letter from Donna, it was just something I needed at that time. I was just becoming so full of hate again. And I wrote her back, and we started exchanging letters. And eventually I asked her if she wanted to come up and visit me.
Before long, Donna begins visiting Brown every weekend. They quickly fall in love. And on August 31st, 1984, they get married at the Howard McLeod Correctional Facility.
I thought the world of her. She was a wonderful woman. You know, I don't think anybody in my life has ever loved me that much or shown that to me like that, you know, but she was a very easy person to fall in love with.
Brown can't bear to be apart from his new bride. He soon comes up with a plan. First, he asks for a transfer to a minimum security work camp. On November 20th, 1984, Brown is moved to Jess Dunn Correctional Center in Taft, Oklahoma, 1 hour north.
There was a correctional officer at the desk, you know, that was checking people in and checking people out. They had open yard areas. There was no one standing over you all the time.
At the new prison, Brown is reunited with an old friend from death row, Willie Davis.
Willie was in prison for stabbing his landlord to death. I had a very loyal bond to Willie, you know, I mean, we'd gone through death row together.
Together, they team up to hatch a plan to break out of prison.
I just wanted 6 months of freedom. That was all I wanted, just to know what it was like to be free for a while.
Brown recalls one of the books he read while on death row. He studies it feverishly.
One of the books I read while I was on death row was called The Paper Trip, and it was supposed to be an illegal book in prison. It was a manual. It went into pretty good in-depth detail on how to totally establish a new ID that was untraceable.
On December 4th, 1984, after settling in at the new prison for just 13 days, Brown and Davis are ready to escape. They hatch a plan to escape from prison work duty on a dairy farm.
There was a count at 6 o'clock in Oklahoma in the wintertime. After they had 6 o'clock count, that's usually when the dairy farmer people would go out.
Brown and Davis blend in with the other inmates on work duty. Then they sneak away. They head straight for a prearranged meeting spot where Donna will be waiting for them. When they arrive, Donna is nowhere to be found.
Well, where is she? I thought you said she was going to be here. She's going to be right here. She'll be right here.
Finally, they spot a truck driving towards them.
Well, there was a lot of excitement, you know. I was just on edge, you know, very much on edge, but I was very happy and excited to be with my wife, you know.
Hey, babe. All right, let's go.
The trio drives 100 miles east to Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Donna has an apartment ready for them. Brown knows that they're in good shape. They've had a decent head start.
8 o'clock p.m. would have been the next count, and that's when they would have discovered that we were missing.
Back at the prison, authorities realize that Brown and Davis have escaped.
This is 21. We got 2 missing.
They notify the FBI about the missing fugitives. FBI Special Agent Eric Paris investigates the case.
We opened an investigation and started contacting family members of the Browns in Oklahoma.
Authorities question Donna's brother. He tells the cops that Donna disappeared days ago and that he's already filed a missing persons report. Police fear for Donna's life.
Tragically, there are people that assist fugitives in escaping only later to be murdered when they're no longer of use. Donna looks like a victim here. He's a convicted murderer. She doesn't know everything about him. My concern was that probably he had done away with her. It's very likely.
Meanwhile, Brown, Donna, and Davis decide to stay on the move. They drive from Arkansas to Paris, Texas. As they settle down, Brown slowly adjusts to life outside the prison walls.
I had trouble sleeping on a bed when I first got out because I'd spent so many years sleeping on concrete and metal bunks. That first night, I don't think I slept at all. I was just so keyed up. I was afraid. Every siren I heard, every car I heard outside, I just knew they were coming to get me, you know. I mean, I had one shot and one shot only.
A week after the escape, the Oklahoma police get a solid lead. They discover that the trio might be hiding out in Texas.
They had developed information that at an apartment building, Donna Brown may be residing with 2 males.
The police rush to the apartment building.
That's the perp woman. That's the perp guy. Everybody's considered armed and dangerous. Most definitely.
Outside, they come up with a plan. Authorities know they're just moments away from catching their man. They wait for the signal.
Freeze!
By then, the apartment had already been vacated. They missed Donna and her 2 male companions by about 30 minutes.
Room's empty. There's no one here. We're returning.
By that time, the threesome is already on their way to Lexington, Kentucky, over 700 miles away.
I figured our best bet would be to find a city that consists of like 100 to 150,000 people because it wasn't too big to where you get lost, but it was, you know, big enough to hide you in.
As soon as they arrive in Lexington, they establish fake identities.
We went to the graveyard where, like, you go and find someone that was born about the same time that you were, and you go to the library and get on the old newspapers, and they'd tell you the name of the parents and the hospital they were born at. You just send them a money order for $10, and they'd send you back a birth certificate.
After securing birth certificates, they need just one other form of ID to get Social Security cards. Brown and Donna come up with a perfect plan. They'll marry again under their new names and get a marriage license.
So my wife and I, we went and got married with our birth certificates and took those 2 pieces of ID to the Social Security office and went in and applied for Social Security card. Once that came in the mail, took the Social Security card and the birth certificate and got a picture ID made up. Within a few weeks, you had a driver's license.
Brown and Donna use the aliases David and Sherry Gregory. Every day, the 3 fugitives search the want ads for jobs. They find a job installing cable TV in multiple cities across the country.
The only thing they needed you to do was own a pickup truck and get there.
In January 1985, the threesome heads to their first gig in Ocean City, New Jersey. While in the car, they start making plans for the future. All of a sudden, Brown notices a cop flashing his lights. As they pull over, the 3 of them begin to panic. The officer tells Brown he was speeding.
sorry.
Brown hands over his fake driver's license. If the license doesn't come back clean, it's over. The officer soon returns to the car. He gives Brown a speeding ticket and walks away. The three of them breathe a huge sigh of relief.
The only way they were ever going to really prove who I was if they got a hold of my fingerprints.
Now, Brown knows his new identity is foolproof.
I realized that there's too many people out there committing crimes for them to be worried about somebody that was not out there making a problem for them.
After arriving in New Jersey, Brown and Davis get to work right away.
You could make $100 a piece a day out there hanging the cable, and the money was coming in, it was good.
The three of them comfortably settle into their new lives.
Pull the slack on it, could you?
But 6 months later, things go south. The company suddenly stops sending their paychecks.
When the money stopped coming in, and we were more or less working for nothing, the amount of money that he owed us was steadily piling up.
Brown, Donna, and Davis decide to quit their jobs and return to Lexington, Kentucky. Yet Davis can't get over the money he's owed, nearly $2,000.
Willie would call every week. Every week he'd call that guy and ask for the money. And he just could not let it go. You know, I even told him, man, forget it.
I'm not going away. You give us our money.
Finally, after 2 months, the company's manager agrees to meet Davis.
Okay, fine. He's going to pay us.
Really, you are really not going to go over there and meet this guy?
Yeah, I'm going to meet him.
My wife begged him not to go. I mean, she just really felt like something wasn't right.
Okay.
Good, Willie.
Bad feeling about this.
I know you do.
Donna's instincts are right. The meeting is a setup. The company manager discovered the men were fugitives. The cops are getting ready to trap Davis.
He's coming. Go, go.
On October 24th, 1985, Davis heads to a Kentucky motel to collect the money.
Freeze, please. Get down, get down, get down, right now.
Kentucky State Police confronted him, and when he was confronted, he made a quick gesture as if he was reaching for a weapon, and one of their troopers shot him in the left arm.
Tough. Code 4.
Although Davis is injured, he survives the attack.
He had no interest in talking to the FBI or any law enforcement about the whereabouts of Michael Brown.
When Davis doesn't return home after several hours, Brown and Donna begin to worry that something has gone horribly wrong.
We knew at that time something was not right. We turned on the news that night, and that was when they had that on there about the Kentucky State Police shooting Willie.
Brown and Donna are shocked at the news. Then, things get worse. They watch in horror as their photos and aliases are plastered on the screen.
So, all of a sudden, we're here just totally exposed, you know, I mean, and our pictures are right there on the television, and all I could think of was we didn't have transportation, we didn't have nothing.
Davis is sent back to prison, while Brown quickly buys a used car. They pack up and decide to head for Dayton, Ohio, 2 hours north.
We both had thought Dayton might be a nice place, so our funds were low. I think we had maybe $400 or $500, and we had to pretty much go into the worst part of Dayton that there was to be able to afford something.
The couple work honest jobs and struggle for 6 months to make ends meet. Life finally turns around for the Browns. They get steady jobs, move into a nicer apartment, and start to establish credit. No one ever questions their aliases. They have no contact with their families or Donna's children. And for the next 8 years, the couple builds a new life for themselves under their false names.
I didn't wake up in the morning dreading anything. I mean, I woke up with a big smile on my face every day, and I was happy.
But for Brown, the paranoia would never completely go away.
America's Most Wanted. I remember when they started advertising for that, I was totally paranoid. Because I'd watch these shows every week, and you had to, just to make sure you weren't on there.
It's been 9 years since Brown escaped from an Oklahoma prison. In January 1993, Brown decides to start his own business.
We sold everything except our bed and a little portable TV, and we came up with like $5,000 altogether.
They named the store K&L Video, which stands for their new aliases, Kenneth and Linda Ginter. Brown hires a small staff to help him run the business, including Dolores Gray, a regular patron of the neighborhood video store.
I was doing bookkeeping and off and on running his store. All the kids would come in there and they'd feel comfortable with Kenny. He was a very nice guy, very caring, loved kids. I mean, he was just like he was one of the family members.
Brown begins to feel as though he's leaving his old self behind.
I was ashamed of who Mike Brown was, and I was proud of who Kenneth Ginter was, because I was a good man out there, and I wish I could have been that person the rest of my life. I really do.
He was like an icon of the community. I mean, everybody knew him. They knew his store. The whole neighborhood went there. You know, instead of like to the big video stores, they'd go to his store.
Still, Brown takes extra precautions to make sure his identity stays hidden.
He was private as far as what phone calls came in. We were not allowed to answer any phone calls coming into the store if we didn't recognize the name.
After several months, K&L Video is a success.
The store was just, it was a gold mine, and it was like in a matter of 6 months, you know, we were just making money.
Back in Oklahoma, the FBI hasn't forgotten about this case. It's been 12 years since Michael Brown escaped from prison. Agent Paris refuses to let the case go cold.
The challenge was for me to find out how to stir up Michael Brown's world, how to bring him out of hiding, wherever he was.
Paris gets a lucky break. A newly launched crime series agrees to profile Michael Brown. In October 1997, they begin interviewing family members and investigators involved in the case. Donna's children agree to be interviewed on camera. Authorities hope it will pressure Donna out of hiding.
They were very excited about the possibility of getting their mom back, and they both readily agreed to interviews, and they sat and basically talked to their mom and told her she was a grandmother, and she didn't even know it. So it was very touching.
Don't make the same mistake again. Come home, be with your family.
Weeks before the show is scheduled to air, the FBI kicks into high gear. Paris pulls together surveillance teams in Washington, California, and various locations in Oklahoma. They monitor phone lines and stake out all known relatives and friends.
I was going to be in the telecenter when the show was airing to assess leads rapidly as they came in. People are going to be calling and telling me, I've seen this guy, we have to be ready to act.
The trap is set. The show is about to air. Then, 1 hour before airtime, Paris gets an unexpected call.
Just before airtime, I got a call from my surveillance team in Oklahoma telling me that the show was being preempted for an Easter special in Oklahoma. And of all the locations we wanted this to air, we wanted it to air in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where Michael Brown's mother was living. Our best guess was that if this show was shown to her, she would run to the phone, or she'd run down the street and use a payphone.
It's bad news, but Paris still receives dozens of leads in other parts of the country.
That night, we sent out several dozen leads to law enforcement agencies around the country, and there were many people that were woken out of bed because their name was similar or they resembled the fugitive.
June 4th, 1999. Back in Ohio, one of Brown's neighbors, Gregory Gray, is browsing the America's Most Wanted website. He's surprised when he comes across a mugshot that looks exactly like Kenneth Ginter, the owner of a local video store where Gray's wife works.
Well, I was scrolling the internet, and I just happened to go to that page and just started scrolling down, and I saw the picture. And I looked twice. I knew it was him immediately. There was no doubt about it. I mean, the hair, I mean, the facial features, the eyes, the nose, the mouth. He was about 18 years old, but his looks have never changed.
Gray is shocked at the story he's reading.
There's no doubt that the picture was him, but the story did not match Kenneth Ginter. He's the kind of guy that you'd invite over for dinner.
About 20 minutes later, Gray gets a phone call. It's Brown.
Gregory, it's Kenneth. Hi. Hey, good. How are you?
He asked if Dolores was home, and at the time she wasn't. He was wanting her to come to work. I told him I saw a picture of him, looked just like him, on America's Most Wanted.
Oh, really? Huh. That is weird.
I said, well, they say everybody's got a twin, That shot a big red flag up right there,
I pretty much blew it off at that point. And we went on just carrying on about normal things for a few minutes.
After work, Brown and Donna look up the website. Horrified, they realize it's only a matter of time before someone turns them in. In addition, Donna's health is deteriorating. She's recently been diagnosed with congestive heart failure.
She started worrying she was never going to get to see her family again. She wanted to go back, and I didn't want to. I did not want to.
Meanwhile, Gray is still curious about the photo. He shows it to his wife, Dolores.
And we were all in shock. We couldn't believe that was him, that he could have done something like that.
Gray wants a closer look at the identifying marks. The website indicates that Brown should have 2 tattoos on his arms. The word Mom on his left arm, and his initials MB on his right arm. He tells Dolores to look for these tattoos the next day.
I was very uncomfortable going back into the store. I had to make sure, my eyes didn't let him know that I knew who he was.
At work, Dolores tries to act normal. She quietly steals a glance at Brown's arms.
I was looking for the tattoos. Basically, how I identified him was the tattoo had Mom, and the other one had his initials. And that's when I knew for sure that was him.
The couple can't decide what to do. Should they turn Brown in?
We have hung out at the lodge together, on the way down and drinking a couple beers together, but it wasn't like he was a stranger at all.
2 days later, Gray picks up the phone and calls the FBI.
I put myself in the victim's shoes and realized that, this is the right thing to do.
In the meantime, Brown and Dunn decide to pack up and go back on the run.
Tried calling him, wouldn't answer the phone. He disappeared, vanished.
So a new chase is on.
The FBI is hot on the trail. This time, they won't let Brown get away with it. Meanwhile, Brown's video store, K&L Video, is left unattended.
The place was left unlocked. I had to go and secure everything. We had to put a sign on the door saying that it was closed until further notice.
Donna, who's been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, decides it's time to return to Oklahoma before it's too late. She's tired of running and misses her family.
When Donna first got sick, we were going to heart transplant clinics every other week, and then she took a turn for the worse. She started worrying she was never going to get to see her family again.
Brown feels he has only one choice.
She'd given up everything for me, She still wanted me to be her husband, and so that was when I agreed to turn myself in. I didn't want to.
On June 29, 1999, Brown and Donna arrive at Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister. They quietly say their goodbyes to one another.
Everything in me is just screaming, man, do not do this, do not do this. So finally I just told her, I said, look, we need to go do this before I change my mind. There comes a time in your life when you start realizing there's right and there's wrong, and there's all these obligations, whatever you want, and it was time to come back.
After 14 and a half years on the run, Michael Brown turns himself in to prison authorities.
Mike Brown, I'm a fugitive.
In his possession are $125, a toothbrush, and a photo of his wife, Donna.
Donna was she was a wonderful woman. It was time for me to give up for her, She gave 14 and a half years for me.
He was tired from the chase. He knew that we were never going to stop looking for him. He realized it was just a matter of time, and he gave up.
Donna Brown is never charged for her role in the escape. She is still married to Brown and is living a happy and healthy life in Oklahoma.
We've always treated Donna as a victim in this case, someone who bought into Michael Brown's overtures.
Today, Brown resides at the Oklahoma State Reformatory in the town of Granite. He still has 14 years left to complete his life sentence.
I served 20 years out of the last 34 in prison, and I just want to go home. One question the parole board asked everybody was, how do we know you can make it out there? I made it for 14 and a half years, and I made it because I wanted to show myself I wasn't the same person I was in 1974.
While he was on the run, Brown made a lasting impression on those who crossed his path.
I honestly believe he was a different person back then. Like Michael I know would have not done something like that. So it's a shock to everybody and the community.
I was just relieved that he's back in custody where he needs to be. I was happy for the victims. The man who had killed their husband and father was now back behind bars.
Michael Wayne Brown belongs in prison for the rest of his life. It'll be a mistake to let a man like that back out on the streets.
Michael Brown lived a low-key life on the lam and almost got away with it. But after 14 and a half years, his run has finally come to an end.